Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, this video is coming to you a little bit earlier than normal. It's Thursday morning, and I'm in New Orleans for the Commodity Classic, and the hotel I'm staying in, which is fantastic, has terrible internet once you get into the afternoon and evening hours. I don't know what happens, but it almost stops. So I didn't want there to be a problem tonight with me recording, so I'm preparing all of this morning. I've got a lot I want to share with you. We're going to talk about seasonal forecast. We're going to talk about what's going on with La Niña now and into the future, whether we could see another one this upcoming fall or winter, and then we need to be discussing how the drought picture is shaping up this spring. So you've been looking here at a map that you saw earlier in the week from me. It's showing you the March, April, and May precipitation anomalies. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to assess the skill of this by looking at just one recent spring forecast, and that would have been last spring's forecast. Now, why we're going to do this is because I need everyone to understand that we do look at the skill of these models, and sometimes before spring, the accuracy of their predictions for spring and summer will exhibit negative skill, which means sometimes it's better to bet against them. Now, I'm not saying we do that this year, but let me give you a case in point. We'll flip here from the ECMWF. This is the forecast for this spring, okay? And I'm going to show you what the National Multi-Model Ensemble, which was just updated the other day, I'm going to show you that in a second, but I want to show you what it did last spring. So this is not a forecast for this year. This is a forecast for March, April, and May in 2021. And what's interesting about this, first of all, is that it does look very similar to this year's forecast, doesn't it? There it is for the ECMWF. This was last year's NMME. And I'd like to show you how the model performed last year, because it called for drought expansion in the plains. It called for very dry conditions along the south, but active around the Great Lakes in the Ohio River Valley. Very wet in the Canadian Prairie and wet here in the Pacific Northwest. Well, as we take a look at this, this is what actually occurred from March through April, May, from March through April and May, those 3 months. Now, in the Central Plains, you got to give the model a very low score. The pattern broke in spring, and it delivered a bunch of precipitation, and it was cool. We did see drought develop over here in the Carolinas, and yeah, you could say the models were picking up on that. But was it wet throughout the Great Lakes states and nearby area? No, it was the opposite. And the West Coast, look at how dry it was compared to what they were predicting. Quite wet in the Northwest. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have to get past what we in meteorology call the spring barrier. That's where we see the jet stream pattern evolve going into spring once we're accumulating the heat from the shift in daylight hours and the directness of the sun's rays. So this is a time of year where seasonal prediction almost always suffers. But what was interesting was this forecast ended up doing this to the drought monitor a year ago. In early March, it looked like that. Now, if that looks what you like right now, yeah, it does look very similar to right now. But this is what it looked like a year ago. And by the time we got into June, we saw it really beat back in this area. Where it developed was in the Southwest, into California, and where we did not have snow on the ground last year, up on the headwaters of the Missouri River into North Dakota. So that was the scenario we saw a year ago. Now, thinking about all of this, okay, let's go look at how the models performed for summer. So now what I'm showing you is going back to that European model, but we're looking a year ago, March 2021, and the forecast for July, August, and September. Now, what's amazing about it was the model actually exhibited an accurate forecast. And remember, there's a difference between accuracy and skill. Skill is repeated accuracy. Okay, so when you look at this, this was the forecast a year ago. Wet in the south. We knew this was likely going to be the case given the tropical cyclone activity. Strong southwestern monsoon. That made sense with the heat that was building in the west. But there was concern about the drier conditions extending into this region. And this is what occurred. Now, some of the wetter conditions you see here, remember, all of this came in because this is a map that shows you July, August, and September. Okay, July, August, and September. A lot of this came in very late, and it was quite dry through this area. But getting all of this right, I mean, the model did much better longer range. So this is what I'm telling you. There's a lot of variability. The accuracy sometimes is very high, but the skill is low. Now, we set all that up because on Monday, I showed you this forecast. This was March, April, May. Now going into April, May, June, July, and June, July, August. And what we commented on was how the models were really splitting on the Mississippi River. More wet to the east and drier conditions in the west with an active southwestern monsoon. It extended the drier conditions clear into the Canadian Prairie. So we saw that in the model. What just was updated was this. Now, you can all get access to this without paying. It's free. Go to the National Weather Service or Google NMME, right there, NMME, and you'll land on this page. Now, what you do is you can see here the 3-month forecast for season 1, 2, 3. See how they go out here. And you can look at, I'd recommend looking at U.S. precipitation rate. That's what I'm going to do with you now. So if I click on season 1, you get all of the forecasts from each model that go into making this one composite map up in the upper left. So I clicked on that. You get April, May, and June composite forecast for precipitation rate anomalies. Now, unlike the European model, the brand new NMME was aggressive on being very dry in the central United States. Very aggressive on this. I just want to remind you how bad it did a year ago. Let's just keep that in mind. I'm not trying to hit on the NMME guys. I mean, they do a phenomenal job, but we just have to know they're up against the same struggles we are, and that is the spring barrier. Now, what about, let's go back here. You can look at temperatures and all that stuff if you'd like, but let's go out to season 3, precipitation rate. Look at how aggressive the NMME has been on expanding the drought area. So what you need to understand is this is one possible solution, one that we'll watch carefully, one that could happen if, and now listen to the if between now and June, the drought area expands in the central United States. One that if the ocean temperatures stay cool in the Gulf of Alaska, or the La Niña continues and persists, what can happen? See, that's why we're looking at all of this. And just as a reminder, this is the June, July, August forecast for precipitation from the NMME, and this is the forecast for June, July, August from the European model. Notice how much wetter it is in the eastern Corn Belt and in the southeast comparatively. Okay, thinking about the southeast, I would like to show you this. Over the last 3 days, big storms down there, heavy precipitation. None of this rain was included in the latest drought monitor update, which was just updated about 30 minutes ago. This whole area and through here, I expect to see improvement on the drought situation. But as it stands, we still have a substantial portion of the United States in drought, and the drought situation in California continues to get worse. In my report yesterday, that for those of you that get my morning email reports, we showed that right now the snow in the mountains in California is hovering between 50 and 60% of average. And we have to ask ourselves, is there anything that's going to correct some of the problems here to bring that moisture back in? Because the Pacific Northwest, yes. But the drought that's in Montana, the drought that extends down into the southern plains, we got to talk about this area, plus how it extends into the Midwest. Because soil moisture values right now from the southern plains and the Midwest are still quite low. We've added quite a bit over here lately with all the very heavy rains, and more's on the way. But you can also see the extent of the dry conditions in California as well. So thinking about all of that, I want to show you this again. This is the year-to-date precipitation ranks by climate district. And pause the video and take a close look. Remember, this is out of 193 years, or excuse me, since 1893, that's 130 years. And the more you go up toward 130, that would be the driest on record, and 1 would be the wettest. So the Mid-South to the Eastern Corn Belt doesn't need another drop right now. We've worked away on the drought in the Southeast with the recent rains. Are we going to be able to pull moisture back into the Southern Plains, Central Plains, and Western Corn Belt between now and April? We need to address that question and also talk about what's going on over here in California. You see, California's biggest problem throughout the year has been that this subtropical component of the jet stream has been non-existent, which is common during La Niña. I made a graphic here to show you the anomalous winds at the jet stream level compared to normal. And again, they're coming from the wrong direction. And that's what's robbed California of so much of a chance of getting moisture to return. This all has to flip around completely. And we ask if that's a possibility. Could we, in fact, change that around? It all boils down, I think, to a discussion about what's going on with our ocean temperatures. Now, if we think about the ocean temperatures, I'd like to show you this graphic. This one shows us every El Nino and La Nina event since 1950. So the El Ninos are the big spikes up, they're colored in red. The La Ninas, the most significant of which are down here in the bottom in blue. Now, the first question I want to address is, could we possibly get another La Nina next winter? So we look historically and say, well, how many times do we have big spikes down that had 3 of them in a row? And there are occasions where we have weaker events that follow. Like, look, 98, 99, the 99 to 2000, 2 back-to-back significant La Ninas. We also saw this right here in 10, 11, and 11, 12. What followed the 98 through 2000, though, was near neutral conditions, and then we went into an El Nino in 2002, 2003. And the 10, 11, 11, 12 was followed by an El Nino late in the summer in 2012. So the likelihood of another La Nina as strong as the ones we've just seen, which are these two over here, is limited. But, and this is important for California here, but we need to know what the current forecasts are looking like. So I showed you this earlier in the month, and it looks at the forecast for the El Nino La Nina region, and where you see the blue bar represents the probability of having another La Nina. The gray bar represents the probability of neutral, and the reds represent the probability of El Nino. What I need you to see is that the latest forecasts for late summer through winter, early winter, are now bordering more on staying neutral or possibly weak La Nina conditions. And we need to be paying close attention to that. So I was thinking about the near-term effects of it first in this graphic, because our La Nina right into here is right now making another big surge. And what I mean by surge is that if you look right at this blue arrow, that blue arrow represents the current position, as you see here, of the strong trade winds. We got them right there in the forecast. See those? We then have coming out of the Indian Ocean, and this is a part of something called the Indian Ocean Dipole. We have these either slow trade winds or trade winds that have a westerly component to them. So I put that as a red arrow. The net effect is that everything kind of comes together here, and we get rising motion where this all comes together, which is some point over phase 5. Now, why we're stressing on this is because the MJO back in late February was over here in phase 3, told us it was going to go to phase 5, but instead collapsed back in here for early March. Now, where it's going from there is that it's going to come back out into phase 2, most likely, and then sweep through 4 and 5. That looks to be where it could go, remembering that it failed to get over here. And there's some historical research that tells us that's a possibility. But I'd like to share with you what would happen if it does that. And then we're going to make an adjustment on the long-range forecast, okay? All right, so correlations. If the MJ goes over to phase 3, what I'll watch for is the development of this ridge here. Because if that ridge sets up, this gives us a very active severe weather pattern for much of the Mid-South to the Midwest and Southeast. Gives us a lot of precipitation in through there, especially if you get that ridge to finally back up, which we've talked about so many times. What if it moves over to phase 4? Well, historically, there's that southeastern ridge again. And it might move in its position, but still it keeps it mild, keeps the Gulf of Mexico open. And if you get more strong flow coming into the west, you'll get those waves to eject in the plains. And once again, it's active. It brings in severe weather. There's nothing about this pattern that from the U.S. west is blocked up. If there's a block, it's over the North Atlantic. Now let's go to phase 5. Again, do you see the southeastern ridge? This is why all of those long-range forecasts want to keep much of the eastern side of the United States mild, but also want to keep things active there. And that's why I think when you look out at the forecast from March 20th to April 20th, that if I could extend this, I would say that this whole region has a better chance of seeing much more active, wetter weather. And that means that the model, I believe at this point, is still too dry, getting back here to the Red River Valley of the South. Unfortunately, I have to agree with it for Southern California into Arizona and New Mexico. There's no sense of a subtropical jet stream forming anytime soon. But Northern California into parts of the Pacific Northwest, there's that jet stream pattern coming over the top, and those waves ejecting right in through here. They draw enough moisture out of the Gulf that I believe, again, I just think this is biased, way too dry in the model. Now, we're going to get a new update of this late tonight. I'll put up my morning report for those of you that get it in tomorrow morning's report to see how this changes. But that's what I'm going to be watching. I'll talk about temperatures in a few seconds. Before I get to any of that, though, we got to talk about what's going on now, because this morning heavy rains moved through the southeast and snow came out of Kansas, southern Nebraska, Missouri. This is what it looked like early this morning. And if we notice right now, in fact, let's get an update on this. Here we go. There's the early morning update. We still have winter storm warnings here and a large area of winter weather advisories around it. See these wind chill warnings to the north? That's a signal of the really cold air that's going to be coming down all the way to the Gulf Coast. And the system that's right now in through here is going to hook toward the east and then run up the east coast, which is where we have our winter storm watches currently. Along the Mississippi and the Ohio and its tributaries, right here in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio and Kentucky, we've got a lot of flooding, and it's coming right down here past Memphis, getting down into Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. We've got to watch that carefully. It's quite windy in the southwest, so there's a lot going on. Let's go right to our high-res NAM to see how this all shapes up. So let's get out here midday Thursday. The snow, see it spreading on the Arctic front into parts of Illinois, stretching back to Colorado and parts of New Mexico. And then as we get into Friday morning, that Arctic front is draped right here. There's overrunning on it, so there's a chance for some ice. And then this system starts to take shape midday Friday, getting into Friday evening. Now at this point, we're going to be watching the southeast for the risk of strong to severe storms. But look at how cold the air is on the backside. That's a flip over to snow right into this region. And as we play this on forward, we're getting snow moving through parts of Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio. And then we got, as it moves on into Saturday morning, that snow then spreads over the Appalachian Mountains. You can tell how cold the air is coming on in this Arctic high. Look at the lake effect snow bands the models are forecasting off of Lake Michigan and Superior, coming off of Huron. And we're going to see it again once this system exits over parts of Erie and Ontario. But on Saturday, again, we're going to watch out in the early morning hours for those strong to severe storms to rip through this part of the southeast. In fact, just take a look at it. This is where the risk is going to be on Friday, but getting into early Saturday morning, it's right in through here. So Storm Prediction Center is keeping an eye out on those two regions. You stack it all up and put it together, this is the next week's worth of precipitation. Notice the regions that are missing out, like from Iowa, Nebraska, getting back into South Dakota, stretching to Montana. That's an area that misses this next couple of systems. But here, lower Mississippi River Valley into the southeast, some places will pick up between 1.5 inches and 3 inches of rainfall right here in Florida. So if you remember, that's going to work away on that drought area in that particular region, but not help these areas. So is there help coming back to the west? That's what I want to talk about with you next. So let's get back to this animation now and take a look. So the European model, we've already seen out to about here. So there's the snow moving through New England. We're looking at some really heavy snows in through here. So let me just give you some numbers. The possibility of picking up between 6 and 10 inches in this area is relatively high. It'll probably be between 2 and 6 inches farther back into right over here of the Appalachian Mountains. That's the heavy corridor we're looking at. And what's coming through today, right in through this area, if we just kind of step this back, this is generally going to be lighter snow, somewhere in the range of 2 to 4 inches that could come through this particular area with lighter amounts into Illinois. All right, now that system's out. Clipper moves through the Great Lakes, see it there? High pressure, which was over Texas, making it really cold on Saturday, moves over the southeast on Sunday, so the cold air goes with it. And at the same time, the northwest starts getting hit. Now, going into next week, we see two things happening. The northwest, multiple fronts coming through. The high pressure system that was over Florida and Georgia is now over here. And what it's doing is the flow's coming around like that, drawing in moisture into this area ahead of the next wave, which is going to come right in through here and come out in Colorado. Watch this. Showers and storms Monday night here in the lower Mississippi River Valley over to this part of the Mid-South. There's going to be a weak low that moves by Tuesday into Wednesday right across the southeast. See how that right there from Monday through Wednesday. That's going to work away on the drought area there. Two other pieces. Little clipper moves to the prairie, and we're going to watch this next Wednesday, getting into Thursday and Friday. And that is what we're talking about. Do you see how, as the MJO comes out into phase 2, 3, and 4, that this is bringing better moisture back into this area? That's what I'll be watching for very carefully. You can see that wave showing up in the ensembles as well. Here it is next Thursday. It's right there, and it sweeps through Texas, comes right, I'm looking at this, comes right over into the southern Mississippi River Valley, moves in the southeast. I will be concerned about that wave producing strong to severe storms. And notice, big trough sweeps back in by the the equinox into the northwest. The pattern's open and moving, which is why I think the models were biased too dry. Okay? Now, this is one shift we've seen. Week 2, the latest updates are no longer showing really dry bias going into the third week of March here. It's no longer in there. The only place that I'm worried about staying drier is California, but it's even not as dry. That's the shift that I wanted to share with you, all right? Let's talk temperatures, South America, and then we'll be done with this forecast video. This map shows everywhere in gray where we're expecting to have a temperature at or below freezing in the next 7 days. And why this is important is right now that Texas has got about 18 to 20% of its corn crop planted, and we're going to be bringing a freezing temperature down pretty far to the south. I'd like to show you the extent of that by looking here first at the National Digital Forecast Database low temperatures. So we've already seen Thursday's lows. There's Friday's lows getting into Saturday. So that white contour is the extent of the freezing air. And then on Sunday, you see that this is going to get pretty far into Florida. Now, by the way, on Saturday morning, this is just crazy to think about. Kansas City, a low somewhere around 1 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas last Friday, it was 85 degrees there. Just incredible to see that shift, or last Thursday, I should say. So that cold air moves out to the east pretty quickly, and a lot of warmth comes in behind it. And take a look at this. By next Tuesday, this region, which is going to see brutally cold air Friday and Saturday, goes back up into the 70s. And Wednesday, right there, that's the new warm sector opening up ahead of that next system. All right, beyond that, let's go out there and look at day 5 through 10, day 10 through 15. Good model agreement between the GFS and the European on more mild mid to late March. But as I said, because of La Niña, the jet stream stays highly volatile. This does not mean spring has fully arrived just yet. We're going to watch. This all comes back to this figure. If we continue to see surges in trade winds right here, putting the MJO in phase 5, which is not common for fading La Niñas, we're going to keep seeing a repeat of what I just shared with you, and that is a possibility. This is also important for South America, and I wish today I had enough bandwidth in the hotel internet to do multiple videos, but I'm just going to cover South America right now. Because if the MJO stays in phase 5, we know historically that that tends to be drier in Brazil's northern growing areas and eastern growing areas where they grow a Safrinha crop, and wetter to the south. And the models seem to be picking up on this. Now, we have seen as of late very heavy rains move through Argentina. There's been flooding in Uruguay, northern Argentina, and into southern Brazil. And over the next week, that's where we're expecting the wettest conditions: southern Brazil, Paraguay, northern Argentina. We're a bit drier north of that, but near normal in Mato Grosso. But watch, as this 1 week sliding window on precipitation gets toward the 3rd week of March, and then eventually here, possibly nudging in on the 4th week of March right there, you can see the effect of the MJO phase 5 going over a bit drier north. Is this going to be dry enough to affect the Safrinha crop? I don't think so right now. But what I'm concerned about is if this does it again, comes back into this configuration, in April, that'll shut the monsoon down early. That'll be during an important time period for grain fill, and that could impact that what is forecast to be a very large Safrinha crop. So we need to watch this very carefully. It seems as though southern Brazil, northern Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay are going to see relief from what they did see earlier in the year. Remember, that was our big drought area back in December, January, and early February, where it was really wet north. Well, let me show you the latest data. It's all flipped around. And now there's been wet weather here and in Argentina too. And the drier conditions are going to start to peel back right here in the north. So we're going to watch all of these things evolve over the weekend. I'll give you a brand new update on Monday morning. I'll get back to my normal cadence of videos. Thanks for giving me some extra time and just giving you one video here on Thursday. But hopefully this clued you in on some big things I'm watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.